This episode of the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast is sponsored by the best-selling book, Halloween Horror Nights Unofficial, The Story and Guide 2017. If you're brave enough to attend Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights, you better believe you'll need a survival guide. Head over to Amazon and pick up your copy now and get the stories behind the scares and never miss a trick.
Covering the Universal Orlando Resort for 6 years, you are listening to the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 266 of the Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. I'm your host Lee and joining me is my good lady wife.
Hello? How do I not have a name?
Tracy.
Thank you.
Everyone knows who you are at this point.
Yes, they do.
And fresh from the opening weekend of Halloween Horror Nights and very tired is Mr. Darren.
What's up, Internet?
And we have a very special guest, as this is our tribute to Dueling Dragons Stroke Dragon Challenge. We have someone who actually used to work it and who's also fresh from the opening weekend of Halloween Horror Nights 27. Joining us from the Disunplugged is Mr. Craig Williams. Hey, Craig.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming back.
Yes.
But this time we can have a conversation rather than it just being one way like last time.
I know, it was very one way last time, but it's okay. I enjoyed it nonetheless. So thank you.
Yes.
You again.
So yeah, the reason we've invited Craig on was obviously because he spent... How many years did you spend... We're going to get into it a bit more, but...
Technically 4 years of my time at Universal. 3.5 to 4.
Awesome.
So I don't remember the exact amount.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a lot more later, but we thought we would, as we always do in these tribute episodes, is begin looking at the attraction's history, and it has quite a history. So,
It does.
Darren.
Yes, the attraction opened at Universal's Islands of Adventure on May 28th, 1999 as Dueling Dragons. It was part of the Lost Continent area of Islands of Adventure and was the major draw to the back of the park with its stunning twin dragon statue entrance.
And that entrance was awesome.
Yes, it was. So that is one of the coolest things that they ever got rid of. It's so sad.
Yeah, when you look, I wonder where those... I've seen quite a few posts about online, actually, that say, I wonder where those dragons actually are now.
Yeah, I look in the prop shop every time I go, but they just haven't shown up there yet.
I don't know how you get them home.
I like to think we've retired in some magical land with the fairies and goblins and things.
I don't understand why they didn't keep it, because it's with a bit
It
of
would have fit.
repainting, it still would have fit that area.
Yeah. Maybe they just let them loose.
Maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people do that with like pythons and stuff in like Okeechobee, so maybe they just, let them go down there in the Everglades.
Or maybe
again.
Newt Scamander's taking them away.
Maybe.
Oh, very possible.
Oh, that's good backstory.
Yeah, it closed for a brief renovation period during the retheming of the Lost Continent to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Hogsmeade, and reopened on June 18th, 2010 as Dragon Challenge.
So yeah, obviously we're going to go back a little bit to its initial incarnation, as Darren just said there. It was Dueling Dragons. Sadly, it was no more at the end. And I've actually found a written description of the original queue line, which, Craig, as we've said before we started recording, you haven't actually experienced the queue line as it was in its original form.
No.
And it's such a shame because it was awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, I blame my parents for never taking us to Universal. They always went to Disney every other year about for most of my childhood, and never. I didn't even know how far away Universal was until I moved down to Walt Disney World to do the college program. It was then that I passed by on I-4 for the first time. It's like, oh wow, it's really close. I thought it was some far off magical land.
Shame on those parents.
Absolutely.
It's fine. I've made up for lost time.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah, so we're gonna go through that written description, which can be found on the Parkpedia website. So Craig, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Dueling Dragons featured arguably the most epic attraction entrance of all time. Two massive statues of the Fire Dragon and the Ice Dragon, frozen in battle, angrily sneering at each other. The ice dragon on the left, perched on its stone pillar of ice, glared downward on the fire dragon, perched on its own pillar of fire, snapping back up at its opposer. Framed perfectly between the dragons were the near misses of the coasters, providing a fantastic photo opportunity.
Yeah, that was awesome, that bit, because there was
Yeah.
the big circle at the
It was like a
entrance,
big-
wasn't it?
Like a big coin, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you could
Embedded
stand.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you got all three of them, was it?
yeah.
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 Yes, all three.
Yeah. So, yes, as guests passed the statues, a large expanse of land was visible as a battleground for the dragons. The dogfight was an impressive distraction from walking through Merlinwood, the village in which the dragons wreaked havoc. Adventurous guests continue through the village, passing the village's warning signs. The path led guests to a castle, derelict and foreboding. In the first room of the castle, guests could watch an enchanted stained glass window which told the story of the dragons.
Yes, here is the stained glass pre-show transcript.
Here we go.
Shattered glass, crumbled stones. What is now hollowed and ruined was, in distant days past, a castle, so fair beyond words that a sorcerer of great renown here settled, to pass in peace in the twilight of his years. Until they came, descended like a winged curse, a twin plague of demonic dragons. The king's army quickly fell, and then, in desperation, the entire kingdom turned to the sorcerer. Alas, he was too old to oppose fiends so fierce and powerful, and so the castle fell, its riches plundered, its land scorched, and people scattered like ash upon the wind. Dang. To this day, the dragons remain, so too the sorcerer, to discourage foolish knaves such as yourselves, yearning for a chivalrous challenge, such as a ride upon dueling dragons. How do I come to tell this tale? Well, my name is Merlin.
Couldn't have done it better myself.
Setting up a tough benchmark to hit.
Guests then continue through the queue to find a tower with Merlin's spellbook on a pedestal.
Merlin's spellbook. Oh, gosh. Serpent of fire, obey my command. Abandon your hold upon this land. Morrow's moon you'll not withstand. For with anguish syllables spoken, I decry your powers forever be broken. Dragon of ice, abominable scourge, from this blighted land diverge. Your frigid stench commence to purge, or let these mournful magic words compose your final loathsome dirge. I missed that word before when I read through it, so I'm not sure if I said it right.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Guests then passed down another hallway and into an open room. All along the walls of the room were the dragon's victims. Each victim depicted a knight that tried to conquer the fire dragon, but in vain. Poems were etched all around the knight's armour describing his death.
The benchmark has been set.
Oh, no. Sir Egbert of Wessex was quite a man, but burned much faster than he ran. Sir Ali entered without his troops. His final words were, alley-oops. Immortal Sir Giles was thought to be, until he wore out his warranty. Slay the dragon, Sir Thomas boasted, and boasted, and boasted, and boasted, and roasted. Once next in line to inherit the crown, Prince Hubert's prospects are looking down. Newlywed was young Prince Craven. Think of all the trouble I saved him.
And that poem was brought to you by Dr. Zeus.
Absolutely.
You guys should have to try to do this in like Southern American accents.
Yeah.
Just to be
Please.
fair.
Never. I can't even do British accents.
In the next room, guests see the ice dragon's victims. The room was a narrow corridor with candles lit all around the rafters. Knights were frozen to the roof of the structure, and ice covered all surfaces.
Yes, the entire remainder of the long queue was the catacombs. The cavern-like environment showed the skeletons of the dragon's victims. The skulls and bones of those foolish knaves seemed to cover every surface of the passageway. The bones of victims often spelled out interesting phrases for guests to read. There was, don't be a bonehead. Enter in peace, exit in pieces. Badum. Heed me. And dueling dragons, choose thy fate sign, which everyone remembers.
Absolutely.
That's the sign I want. When they close this thing down, if that's in the prop shop, I want that sign.
Yeah.
I'm buying whatever's there.
Yeah.
You should get first dibs, to be quite honest, Craig, having worked it.
I mean, I have a piece of one of the dragons already, so
Cool.
that's about as good as you can get.
Tell me it's a tooth.
And no, it's just a nice broken red piece of fiberglass. Nothing exciting.
Awesome. Being a set of dueling coasters, the attraction required guests to choose which dragon to conquer at this point. A large sign urged guests to choose thy fate, as Lee said, or for those fluent in Latin, okay.
Go on, Darren.
Convoque fortitudinem tum.
Yes, as you can hear, Darren is not fluent in Latin.
Yes, fortitudium tum. Fire dragon was to the left and ice was to the right.
Tracy, how do you pronounce that? Your Latin's not bad, is it?
Convoque fortitudinem tuum.
There we go.
There you go.
Ooh,
That sounded good.
What? Should put it into Google.
I think there's a
Translate.
pun there
What? Right.
because it says tuum at the end.
Right.
Might not be.
It might
but
actually just be
It might
Latin.
just be Latin.
I'm
But
going to put it into Google.
I didn't actually do Latin in school. I did actually abolish Latin in school long before I went to school. Like decades.
I could make a joke there, but it's not worth it.
Pardon? No, it's not, dear. Be careful.
Yeah, if you want to read more about the history of this attraction, you can head over to parkpedia.wordpress.com.
Yes, they've got actually some really good stuff on there. There's as part of that, the article with this on, there's an interview with one of the designers behind it. It's really, really good.
Awesome.
These guys do a lot of decent stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, glad someone's preserving it.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind these episodes, really. Behind like a tribute when something closes, that it's there. You know, everyone. I've said this before when we started the podcast. Everyone knows the history of every Disney ride. It gets rammed down your throat on every podcast at some point or another. But the Universal stuff doesn't really get put out there. And that's the stuff that I want to hear about. As a Universal fan, that's what I'm interested in. So I do these as much for me as anybody else.
Yeah.
No, it's up even at Universal attractions. I mean, they don't really teach you. You just learn what the person knew before from what the person knew before. I mean, they have all the backstories and stuff, but not like the same kind of thing that you're talking about. So just a very abbreviated version. So you get the idea of what attraction you're working at.
So yes, the queue, as we've said, has significantly changed over its transition to fit in with the mythology of the Tri-Wizard Tournament, which will actually be quite interesting once the new attraction gets built, because when the Wizarding World Hogsmeade first opened, it was said that it was very much set within the realms of the fourth book, like during the Tri-Wizard Tournament. And I think they are trying to get away from that now, because I think they've realised that they've really pigeonholed themselves into a time frame that didn't allow them a lot of freedom to do other things. So I think that could be part of why they've decided to take out a tiny little bit. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but yeah. And the queue now pales in comparison to that old one. It's, anyway. So we're going to go through that a little bit, because I don't think there's that much to talk about. But, Darren?
When first entering the queue, guests were taken past a number of banners for the Tri-Wizard Tournament showing support for the 4 contestants. After passing the Weasleys, crashed flying Ford Anglia? Yeah. They entered the champion's tent.
That is actually, what's the word? There's a contradiction that'll do. That's the word. A crashed flying Ford Anglia.
Yeah, it's not flying anymore,
No.
is it?
Yes. Sorry.
They crashed Ford Anglia capable of flight. at one point.
Yes.
That was capable of flying before it crashed.
Sorry, pedantic's my middle name. From there, guests passed a large pedestal with the Tri-Wizard Cup glowing at the top, and several dark tunnels which lead to both coaster stations. Just before entering the station, guests had to choose which coaster they want to ride, the Chinese Fireball to the left or the Hungarian Horntail to the right. Once at the station, on the ceiling, there was a projection of the dragons.
Was there? Do you know, I don't even think I've taken any notice going through that queue when we got in on that ride.
Yeah, I remember the cup for sure.
Yeah, that's about it.
I don't remember it glowing.
Yeah, the cup does.
Oh, it does, and it was starting to look really bad by the end.
Oh,
it
dear.
just the LEDs and stuff weren't working right at all.
Oh dear.
But yeah,
The uneven glow of the Triwizard Cup.
thing of beauty. But yeah. So the queue before the Harry Potter refurbishment was set as a ruined castle where the fire and ice dragons lived. The queue passed through dungeons and included human skeletons, torches, and cobwebs. Just like the present queue, to ride fire, guests would go left, while riders wanting to ride ice would go right at the intersection point.
I love how we went through a whole thing of the original queue, and then we've summed up the new one in about 5 sentences.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Oh yeah, that was it. Huh?
I mean, we could have added more detail. Like, you forgot about the candle room and the beautiful tapestries hanging on the wall in there that you couldn't see because it wasn't lit properly.
Yes.
And
a friend of ours said he'd been in there with his phone, I think, before the metal detectors went in. He said those tapestries in there are stunning, but again, like you say, you just can't see them.
Yeah, I got a little bit of video with my low light camera, and I still haven't put it out yet. I'm not finished doing work on it, but I got pretty decent video of the tapestries.
Cool.
And I mean, the only time I got to actually fully see them was at one point in time when we were down for like an entire week because they were switching out the brakes. They turned on every single light in the entire building, and so that way we could clean for the first time, because it was a lot of cobwebs and disgustingness and just so many horrors. I can't even explain. You would have had to see with your own eyes. But once they had those on, it was like you could actually see that, because when work lights would be on in the morning, it would still be very, very dim in there. So it was cool to actually see them like they were intended to be seen. But yeah, other than that, nothing really to see.
I wonder if they'll use those again, or whether they'll end up in the prop shop. There's got to be some decent stuff going in that prop shop at some point.
Oh yeah, no, it's probably at least one of the eggs. I have a feeling. So I know
that would be cool.
Some of the techs are trying to like fight over what they can sneak into the different buildings all around. So it'll be interesting to see what actually makes it out.
Cool. Yeah, so as I mentioned there, in April 2015, metal detectors were installed as a permanent fixture to the entrance, which is
very magical.
The problem was, I think we should get into this a little bit, Craig, because I'd be interested in your input on it. Obviously, when the metal detectors went in, everyone expected those coasters to duel again, because at that point, there was no reason for them not to, because obviously we realised they stopped dueling because of people getting injured on the ride. So the whole point of putting the metal detectors in, obviously, first and foremost, was to stop anybody taking anything on and the potential of people getting injured. But then that gave that slight hint of hope that they might start dueling again. Unfortunately not.
I mean, at least from our standpoint, no. It was turned off and never to be turned on again, regardless of what they added or changed. I mean, the metal detectors were just... overall, from our standpoint, what we were being told, it was first and foremost because even like when people had to empty their pockets, and people were still finding ways around it. Sometimes team members were still screwing up and saying like, okay, you need to go down to the lockers. Then they come back up with everything still in, and they just walk right by. Like, everyone, if there's a rule, people will find a way to break it. But yeah, that was just, besides the issues with stuff in pockets, it also kind of had to deal with from an operational side. A lot of people would come in and out of Dragon Challenge very quickly because they'd get fired due to safeties. Safeties, obviously, when you break any safety protocols. And so a big thing back and forth throughout the history of Dueling Dragons into Dragon Challenge was prosthetics and casts, and I'm sure everyone's dealt with that at one point in time. But so many, I mean, I can't tell you in the time that I worked there how many people I watched get fired because of prosthetics and other little issues like that. So it really was, it's like it was kind of the second backup system that Universal created to help out with all their attractions, and definitely Dragon Challenge. Like the first one, you might have recognized at some point towards the end, everyone that worked on the loading platform all had headsets on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that came obviously after like Forbidden Journey had them, but the big thing was there to stop people from getting safeties because there was a lack of communication. So if they were able to then talk to the grouper, and they were also all able to talk to the control booth. So if everyone was being able to communicate about every little potential safety thing, then they were more likely to not get safeties. And that still didn't really solve much, because at the end of the day, common sense rules first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. I don't get the mentality of park guests that would try and, I'm just going to leave all this crap in my pocket and try and get in, rather than just play by the rules. I mean, it doesn't help. I will hold my hands up and say the locker situation at the Universal Parks is an absolute nightmare. It really is.
Oh, I mean, I've seen people trampled inside lockers, especially when I worked at Forbidden Journey.
Oh, geez, yeah.
We had to, one of the controls trained team members also had to deal with smart card in the lockers down there. And it's just at points in time, we would flat out leave because it was way too dangerous there. So lockers have always been a pain. You would think they could figure out a way to design them into it without it being too much of an issue. But yeah, lockers, metal detectors, that it definitely wasn't a highlight of the job.
No, I can well imagine.
Yeah. Well, they only put those metal detectors on certain rides, and I think we all know that each one of those rides that they put metal detectors at really do have the best cues and storylines going on through them. The Hulk, Rip Ride Rocket, and Dragon Challenge. So, the execs were like, oh, people aren't paying attention to this wonderful cue and storyline. We need to do something about that. Take their cell phones before they go in.
Maybe that's, yeah.
You were with it when I was
always enthralled with the story at Rip Ride Rocket. So,
yeah, right?
It's a history of concrete, isn't it?
Doing it wrong.
Oh, it's horrendous.
Did we ever... I'm just thinking, was it the time before last? It will have been. When I went through the metal detectors, because I think it was... I don't remember you being there. And I was having an argument because of my glasses.
The metal detectors weren't there the time before last.
No, well, it must be last time then. And I'm going through, and because my glasses are prescription glasses, and I had prescription sunglasses on, I was getting... And I have a strap, and they are welded to my head. And I was getting told, well, you can't go any further with your glasses. And I'm just saying, I won't be able to go any further without my glasses.
It's bad enough going through those queues in the dark with your glasses on.
Yeah.
It is. I have to grab onto.
It's like going through a Halloween Horror Nights house.
But I appreciate why they're there. I'd rather be safe, but I do need to actually wear my glasses to see. So
that person was just a jerk then.
Oh, he was. It was absolute Jobsworth. It was that little bit of power had gone to his head.
I see people with sunglasses and glasses on all those rides all the time.
No, that was never a problem. I mean, if you had a camera, if you had the sunglasses that had the camera in there, it was okay. You can't wear them because potentially recording. But other than that, it's people need sunglasses. People need hats. Like I don't like getting sunburn on the top of my head, so I'll wear a hat. It's easy.
This as well. I mean, I always wear a glasses strap because prescription sunglasses are not cheap. I don't want to lose them.
I always remember when you bought a strap for the second visit we went to Universal in 2005, and you were saying, like, riding the Hulk and stuff. It's like, it'd be nice to actually see the ride for a change rather than looking at it through blurred vision all the way through.
I mean, every single time, I think, except for like once, I always rode with my glasses on. And no strap or anything. The only reason I rode the one time without them is just I wanted to see what it would be like, and I think I've only been sicker on Dragon Challenge once.
Yeah, it's definitely better with glasses. I thought you were going to say about what I always say when everybody says, "Oh, your glasses." No.
Don't. It's a family show.
You can beep it. And afterwards I regret it, but I always say, "It's okay. I've got a strap on.
You can't say that.
And every time I go, no, I said it again.
Yeah, but no one ever comments. Anyway, shall we move on after that?
I don't even know where we are.
We've just gone off on a complete tangent about metal detectors.
What's new?
Yeah.
I'm surprised. It's interesting whether... I can't believe we're still going on about it. Because obviously J.K. Rowling was very, very specific about the theming for that. I wonder if they... Craig, do you know if they would have had to pass metal detectors through her to put them in?
They did through Warner Brothers and JK. So every decision made in the wizarding world has to go by them. Just even my wife, who still deals with some stuff that goes through Potter, like if they want a new sign remade for something inside the park, just because it got graffiti on it, gum, whatever. Even though if it's already been printed before, it still has to go through that check system. So the metal detectors had to. It's just one of those things that everyone just talked about. At some point, safety has to go above and beyond.
Absolutely,
above and beyond the theming of it, and when universal safety is priority number one, so it had to happen that way. But Warner Brothers fought back about everything. We said that we needed not metal detectors, our radios. So that way we could talk to leads, hear what's happening in the park all throughout the attraction. And we still, as much as we said we needed for safety, they fought back on it. And so on days when Warner Brothers would walk through, we'd have to just hide everything.
And they don't listen to this.
Find it.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, I hope they don't listen to this, then they'll know.
Oh,
they won't listen to this. I don't have to worry about that.
I'm sure we've been caught by them without it before, but
I'll jump in one thing actually that wasn't written in here that I forgot. That I'm surprised no one's mentioned is that little cut through in the queue, so you don't have to come all the way out and back in again if you want to ride the other one. There's that little cut through.
The rewrite stairs.
Yeah.
Well,
I just thought that was quite cool.
When they were open.
I don't think it was open last time.
It all depended on staffing. Usually, with the metal detectors, it always usually was, but because it had to be for people that got sent down to the lockers. But it would go back and forth while I was working there. Sometimes we'd have it, sometimes we wouldn't. So
I may not have ducked under.
Oh yeah, no, that's.
Oh yeah, we did actually. If I remember right.
Power trip.
Yeah, I'm not going all the way back to the front again. There's no one here.
Of course, I did that very British thing of waiting until there was nobody walking up, so I wasn't actually queue jumping, and I didn't get caught.
Yeah. Oh, see, I would put up the rope to block that off because I wanted to make sure that everyone got their exercise.
Caring about their health, I like it.
It is.
Doesn't listening to the crew at UUOP every week make you wish that you were actually at Universal Orlando Resort? Well, stop wishing and start doing. Mouse and Muggle Travel Company is the perfect place to begin. Their team of concierge-level travel planners will help you every step of the way. And for you Muggles who also love the mouse, their team of experts specialize in Disney destinations too. And the best part of all, their services are free to you. So, if you're ready to plan your next Disney or Universal vacation, let Mouse and Muggle Travel Company do all the work for you. Just go to mouseandmuggle.com and fill out a no-obligation quote request. Or send an email to info@mouseandmuggle.com. And remember, whether you're a mouse or a muggle, Mouse and Muggle Travel Company can help make your next vacation simply magical.
Right, moving on then. Let's talk to Craig about his experience working Dragon Challenge.
Yes, we've had a little bit already, but
yes.
yeah.
So those of you who listen to our podcast documentary, or podumentary,
that's what I called it.
Yeah, in December, we'll know that Craig started working at Universal Orlando after being fired by Mickey.
Sorry, Craig. I had to put that in there.
It's okay. I like talking about it.
Well, I have heard that Mickey's a
bleep.
Yeah, a bad boss. Yeah, fires everybody. No. Craig started at Dragon Challenge in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So, Craig, how much of a Harry Potter fan were you before you started working at Universal? I think we've already touched on this a bit.
A little bit, yeah, but
Yeah, I mean, I was a decent sized fan. I don't want to say that I was like a massive Harry Potter fan. I watched all the movies that were out to that point. I had read all the books through once. It was something that I obviously grew up with, but it wasn't like it rolled my life like so many other people out there. And
like me.
I mean, now it kind of does.
Yeah.
It definitely has shifted since working at Universal. But no, when I first started, I was just your average casual fan. And I think I told the story when I was on here last. I wanted to work at ET.
Yes.
When I was hired, because all I had heard about was how great the queue was and the smell in there. And so that was my standards. Never going to Universal. I had no idea what to say. And they, based on me working at Test Track, they wanted to get me to work at Rip Ride Rocket. And I said, absolutely not to that. And that's when the Harry Potter question came up, and said, yeah, I am. And they asked, well, do you want to work at Forbidden Journey? And I was so much not a Universal fan at that point in time. I didn't know what that was, so I just asked, like, is it? I know I was really out of the loop entirely, and I asked, I was like, is there heights in it? I don't like walking upstairs and roller coasters and all that stuff.
No.
And they said 20 feet off the ground. I said, okay, that'll work for me.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into it. And then after working at Forbidden Journey, starting off dressing up as a student every shift, I mean, it didn't take long before the world just became only about Harry Potter. Yeah. But I'm not complaining.
No.
Craig, when you worked at Forbidden Journey, then you said you dressed up as a student. Did you have to dress up as a specific house student, or was it just generic student?
No, it's all based on size. So, extra small and small for the vests, and ties were obviously unisex, but for the extra small and small, that was Hufflepuffs, and then small, medium, and large was Slytherin, and then I think it was small, medium, large as well for Gryffindor, maybe extra large in that too, and then 2X and up at the time was Ravenclaw.
Talk about discrimination.
Oh, that fits me and my house perfectly.
Well, so many people would be upset because they'd come in and like, I want to be a Ravenclaw. Like, no, you're not 2X. So I had at least
donuts.
3 or 4 friends who just went to one of the stores and bought the sweaters and just wore that, so that way they could be their house, because everyone there took it very seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it was our thing. Like, with mine, I wore Gryffindor, I think, in like the first week I started, just because I wanted to start off in Gryffindor, and immediately someone called me a Weasley with my red hair that was kind of long, and just, I think I was wearing contacts back then, so it looked even more like it. And so that was the first and last time I ever wore Gryffindor, and it was Slytherin from there on out. And every now and then they wouldn't have the right size, so I switched to a Hufflepuff. And then my story was, when I did that I was still a Slytherin student, but I was just changing into Hufflepuff to spy on them, and that's what I would tell guests. And yeah, it's like, everyone was very passionate about their house and what they wore.
You say, look, if you really want to be a Ravenclaw, you get 35% staff discount. Go and knock yourself out in the restaurants and come back in a couple of months' time.
You can do that, or you can just wait till the 50% off holiday discount and buy the vest. They don't know which one's easier. The food's more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the worst. The best guest comment I ever read at Forbidden Journey was obviously because the ride was very hard for some people to get on. It was back when Universal still had the meal plan, the all-you-can-eat one.
Yeah.
And they wrote the most scathing comments. This attraction is the worst. It was awful. You guys were terrible. We hate you for it, but the meal plan was great. Like,
Oh man. Oh,
Definitely. So, Craig, what was your actual position title for the Dragon Challenge? And then walk us through a day of work there.
okay, I was a relief lead at Dragon Challenge, and so essentially a lead, for those of you out there who don't know what a lead is at Universal, it's kind of like a shift supervisor.
Mhm.
So not management level, it's still just, hourly pay grade, just with a little extra power. So
Craig, what's the hierarchy of sort of positions on an attraction like Dragon Challenge, like from the top to the bottom?
okay, gotcha. So I'll start at the very top and just wind down the way. For different areas of the park, you have managers and assistant managers, and they will be like the final say. So like when I got promoted from Forbidden Journey to Dragon Challenge, it was my manager who welcomed me in and gave me the promotion. And then below your managers is your supervisors, and each venue has multiple supervisors that they are the ones that are, when things get really bad in a situation, they'll be the ones who eventually make their way out dressed in their business casual clothes. Then the people that you talk to a decent amount when issues go wrong, those are your leads. And you have status leads who are full-time. They only work lead shifts, and then relief leads. And that's what I was. And I was like, I worked either 2 or 3 lead shifts a week, and then 2 or 3 attendant shifts where I could do whatever. Then you have your trainers, your control team, your control operators, your CBOs, and then finally your regular attendants. And then every now and then, if you ever felt like you saw a person frozen in one single place all day when you're coming up to attraction, every now and then those would be your frozen rescues, because they needed an extra hand, and they weren't trained at the venue, but they may have been trained in the same area.
Right.
Like for Wizarding World only, it was always terrible working there, especially pre-Diagon Alley, because if you didn't work at either Hippo, Potter, or Hippo, Forbidden Journey, or Dragon Challenge, then you weren't Potter trained. And so
Potter trained. Tracy's that's hilarious.
I know, right? And so it Dragons, like when I was a lead there, if we were short a morning and we couldn't open up, you'd have to call over to Forbidden Journey and Hippo and just hope that someone had an extra person that they could send over. If they didn't, then they would have to go scan all park wide and call out to every single supervisor and lead team and find out if there was anyone who was Potter trained that had transferred out. And that was always a mess, but especially the people who got out for a reason. They didn't want to deal with Harry Potter anymore. And then we'd have to pull them back in for a day. They were always miserable.
Oh.
But yeah, it's deep.
So how many TMs will have been working Dragon Challenge at any one time?
Okay, on our full roster of people that we had working for us, when I was in the midst of it, we had seven leads, and then I want to say there was around 84, 85 team members.
Wow, I did not think there would be that many people working that attraction.
Yeah, but that was just the full list. So on an average day, we had 2 unload, 2 load on each side. So 2 control booth. You had about 20 positions. So then we'd usually have probably about 16 people to open then, and then have about 4 or 5 breakers come in the morning, at 9 o'clock. Say the park's open 9 to 7 that day. So we'd have 4 to 5 breakers in that would start break rotations and get people their lunches and all that. And then at night you'd have another 16, 17, 18 people come in. and finish off the night. So I guess, yeah, the average maybe about 40 people in one day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it was fun. And like, so the lead position, like I said, like I was some days of the week, let's say I got there, I was an opening lead. The park opened at 9 a.m., of course, for early entry. We would have people get in starting at 8 a.m. into the park. So I would show up at like 6 o'clock, and I would go and pick up like all the radios that we would use for the day, and get my my sheet printed with everyone who was supposed to work that day, and then inevitably dealing with the operations base to hear about how many people called in, which that was always like the big stressful part of the morning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Wondering whether or not you had enough people to open, if you were only going to be able to one side, just so many things. And, you know, I make my way out to the venue and start by going over, you'd have like an opening checklist where I or if I was opening with another lead, you know, you walk through and you make sure that all the effects are working, all the sound clips, that the flying Ford Anglia was revving its engine and the lights were blinking and smoke was coming out of it. And, you know, just checking all the computers, all the monitors. At that point in the morning, the tech still had control over the ride. So then I would go in and start looking at which positions I was staffing, look at the budget for the day to see how many people we could actually pay to work. So on days that we were like really high staffed, you'd have a queue patrol person who would be the weird random person you'd see walking around the queue cleaning. Other days the leads had to do that because you just tight staffed and didn't have the money to get someone else or call-ins. And we just go over all that way more than I thought expected, because at Disney, it's all computerized and done so much more differently. Even at Disney, it's cast deployment system. So a computer tells you where you're going next based on who's clocked in and out for lunches and stuff. For us, you know, I had to come up with my rotations every single day. And that's always challenging when you're staring at a room full of people who showed up early to try to get the spots that they were excited about and wanted to work at. And then you had to break their hearts and put them in a greeter rotation with grouping, as well as the Universal Express redemption.
Right.
Because then they're miserable all day, just having to work those boring, slow-paced positions.
Yeah.
But and then once the techs would give us the ride, we'd do our test rides and all that fun in the morning, and eventually open the doors. And then the rest of the day was just checking on people, handling guest situations, which were very, very common in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter all the time, whether it was lockers or problems with guests not being treated correctly, not understanding the right thing, and just do that from open to close. And that was a full day. So from a team member standpoint, just being like an attractions attendant, that was just a much more easier. So like if the early entry started at 8 o'clock, for that, you'd show up at 7 and, you know, get dressed and find your rotation. And then once they send you out there, you just work away for the rest of the day. But it was pretty easy going. When some of the hardest parts of your day was having to find the right pair of suspenders and those awful pants. It's not the worst, but it was difficult going from Forbidden Journey, where we essentially wore pajamas. They're just the pants and the vest and everything was so comfortable. Then going to Dragons, where you're wearing 5-pound pants that just weigh you down and are so uncomfortable and rip. Just, you know, we had a whole drawer full of safety pins because everyone would just pop buttons, and it was a nightmare with wardrobe there. But yeah, lots of interesting times.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of them things. It's weird to think that you have like a specific budget for the day of what team members you can have in and having. It sounds like some sort of Sim City game where it's like it's Sim Dragon Challenge. This is how much money you've got to spend, and you've got to work out the best combination of team members to staff your attraction for that day.
Yeah, no, and it all fluctuated too, especially with like dragons. So, for the average typical Universal Islands of Adventure 9 to 7 day, it wasn't really difficult. You did that day in and day out, but then once summer would roll around, that changed things up because most of the time you want to have 3 dragons on each track. And when you have that, it changes the amount of people that you need at load and unload.
Yeah.
So then you have to start bringing in more people, and then things would get very difficult at that point. And then if when you'd have a special event, because so many people love renting out Potter, that just threw in a different twist because you're operating on an after hours budget. And some people demanded like, oh, we have so many people, we need to have 4 trains online. So that way we make sure that we're always getting people through. And then what in reality, you only get like 3 people on each train. So you could have got away with just 1, but
that's galling.
Drove around the budget. It was, it's definitely, it was very interesting. From other people working theme parks, I never expected to be that hands-on with Universal, being able to really given that much power because if you screwed up the budget, if you let people get overtime in a non-busy period because you weren't tracking hours and numbers, then you get demoted for that.
Wow.
So, and watched it happen before too. So it's kind of stressful.
It sounds it. It's not something I don't think I would particularly like it.
It was one of those things though, like for a lead, if you want to become a supervisor and get on salary, you had to go through that way. I mean, every now and then they'll hire in a supervisor there that came from Disney or Legoland somewhere else that has experience, so they jump them up. But to be a lead, you literally only when you're working lead shifts, you get paid $1 more to deal with so much more, like handling the guest situations, taking care of the budget, knowing that you could get demoted at any time for screwing up, but always being the first on call anytime you have to clean up code 5s and is vomit. And it was
not a protein spill.
Protein spill, code V it's all the same. And it was kind of, it was one of those things like, if I would have stayed with Universal, I was glad I did it. But one of the best things was then once I started working with the Diz and I was able to go seasonal, being able to look back, like I now only make $1 less than I did before, and I'm not working as much. But I don't know why anyone would become a lead. It's not worth it when you could just have fun with guests all day and not have to deal with that when it's only for $1 more.
Yeah.
But
thing is, you need them because without them, the rest of it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, until I ended up leaving Universal and working for the Diz, I was eventually on my way to becoming a career person at Universal. I was being teased like right before I left that one of my old leads that was now a supervisor, she was going to bring me over to Men in Black to be a supervisor over there or something. I don't even remember what she was trying to hint to me about, but I was on that path, and it was one of those things you just had to do it. And at the time, I was miserable all the time with how tired I was.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
No regrets on it. It was a blast.
Yeah. Cool. Now, I'm sure that, like us, many of our listeners would like to know some of the hidden things about the working of the attraction. Can you tell us anything about that?
I mean, I can probably share a little things here and there. I just don't know what people think are interesting, because you guys cared about the budget and stuff, and I thought that was the boring part.
It's just interesting. It's not something you consider goes on. You expect that sort of stuff to be covered by
Higher up.
Yeah, not attraction specific.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Dragon Challenge. One of the good things about that, while a lot of the backstory and history isn't as well known, the good thing about a Dragon Challenge is so many accidents there were so talked about that a lot of that stuff was out there. And, you know, it's just like, I'm sorry, I'm just rambling to try to think of something interesting.
Was any funny stories then, Craig? Anything that's happened that's just ridiculous?
There's been so many. Like on our show before, I talked about it. I don't know how many of your listeners follow us, but one of the most bizarre days it ended up being a recurring common theme, but apparently bees are very attracted to the sound of vibration. Bees.
Remember, I listen. Beads.
Oh.
Bees. And bees just are completely attracted to vibration.
Right,
and,
okay.
You know, like it or not, the Dragon Challenge lift shook a lot, especially when both trains were on the lift. And so what would happen in some of the summer months on really bad days, we would get beehives forming up on top of the lift hill.
Oh.
And so then when the trains would start operating in the morning and into the midday, it would start shaking and the bees would all start coming out. And you know, then when you have two dragons coming up full of guests, the bees were starting to get agitated and angry and stinging people. And so multiple times we would have to close down operation and send techs up with like pesticide and start killing a whole bunch of bees before we could run it again. And that was just like one of those little quirky things that happened. And we had some big issues. Like I mentioned that we went down at one point for like a week because of brakes being replaced. And I guess that would have been sometime in 2012 that it would have happened. And I'm sure a lot of people might remember from that time. There was a point in time for months where Dragon Challenge closed down every day at, I believe it was 2:00 for an hour for what was called brake deburring. And essentially they added these brand new brakes to Dragon Challenge that were going to be beautiful, and it would slow the ride vehicles to a nice good stop. And the best part about it is the brakes didn't wear down as fast as the old brakes that they were using. The issue was, though, that the new brakes they installed had a tendency to have all these shavings start coming off. And so we're talking about metal shavings. And so after the week of being down and all the brakes are being replaced, we then went back up, and every day we were going back down because metal shavings were flying into the faces of everyone on the trains as they were coming into the brakes.
Ow.
Yeah. And so then from there, we had to start doing a daily tech downtime that was controlled. So we knew it was always going to happen as soon as the techs would show up, and they would run out and they would basically use grinders to shave down the brakes.
Wow.
In the midday. So that way it wouldn't build up too much and start falling off. And that just all the time. Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing this now the ride's closed, because everyone will be like, hey, listen to this big guy, I'm never riding that ride again.
I mentioned the piece of the dragon that I have. That's one of the dragons from one of the Fireball trains. I think it was Fireball 3. And I was opening, one of my friends was the lead that day, and I was just one of her attendants, and she asked me to ride in her place. And my favorite seat in each train was always seat 13. So like on Horntail, that was the first row, and then the second from the right. And obviously Fireball was the opposite. It's second from the left, and like that's where I always rode. So I did my test ride on Fireball for her, and after we started going down the hill, it just started, everything shook, and it was so violent sounding. And I think it was at the point that we went over the first, I think it was the first full hill where the near miss was.
Yeah.
And I think it was there. And at that point, I just heard a crunch.
Oh.
And the rest of the ride, as we were going through, it just like it just kept crunching and grinding, and I thought, oh god, this is it. This is designed to not derail, but it's going to happen, and it's going to be a sad way of going out. And luckily, it grinded all the way through. It never stopped. It never slowed down. Like I made it all the way back in. I didn't gravity zone out anywhere, and got back in, and I ran off and started screaming at her. I was like, "It can't go. You can't run this today." It almost came off, and so the control booth did exactly what they're supposed to do when there's an emergency. They hit that emergency stop and take the whole ride down. Called techs, came out to look at it. And once you hit the emergency stop, you're not allowed to like cross over different sides of the ride vehicle or anything. So we couldn't get over to see what the problem was. But then once we did, once we did get over to that side and the techs got there, we saw that the front fiberglass panel with the dragon on it just completely ripped apart and shattered under the wheels, and that was all of that sound, and it was just half hanging on because those were only attached by bungee cords.
Right.
So
right.
It was just one of those things. The bungee cord came loose, but yeah. So for like all throughout the ride track was all these scattered little red pieces from the fireball. So one of the techs brought up a big chunk of it, and I broke off a little part of that too, and then took it home, and I have it on my shelf. I always remember that one time that if I was sitting one more seat over, I would have had fiberglass to the face.
Wow.
Oh, jeez.
That's scary stuff.
That's a recurring trend at Dragon Challenge between eyes and just everything else.
Shavings and fiberglass. And just remember, everyone, Dragon Challenge was made by B&M. There's another B&M in that park. Just be careful.
A couple of quarters in your pocket seem like the least of your worries.
Well, the most exciting part was once we started commissioning on Diagon Alley, we were all taking bets because throughout the attraction's history, they had an issue with, I think the final number we heard was since the last time it was down, so when it was transitioning over into Potter. After it opened as Potter, before I got there was at least 3 prosthetic limbs that went into the water.
Oh.
And because people didn't let anyone know, didn't secure it, didn't catch it, and so off comes a prosthetic and lands in the water. And so when they started commissioning, they were finally going to drain all the water in there. And I think they ended up finding one of them. So we were all like just anticipating, like, what else are they going to find in there? We know.
Right.
And basically, at one point in time, every team member who worked Dragons lost a name tag at one point or so in terms of the ride. I know I probably went through at least 2 or 3. So it was just a common occurrence. But yeah, that's those are some of the fun ones. I'm trying to think of what else. Like, the dragons had a name in the original story with Blizzrock and Pyrock.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Right.
One of them has a Twitter account. They keep tweeting me every now and again.
They also had names for whenever it went into Potter. Do you know that?
No.
No? Okay, so an exclusive. It was on the Horntail, I believe the name was, I think that one was Reaper. And the Fireball was Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
That might be backwards. But yeah, that was the two names that were kind of linked up to it, with trains that had problems with accidents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we still kept the naming thing alive. But it was a lot of the people, once I came to work there, they were actually still a bunch who had commissioned in from Dueling Dragons. So a lot of them were like, it was always Dolan to them, and it was always going to be them. So they would they like to keep things still interesting with kind of the ways that things were back when it was Dueling Dragons. So a lot of it was just like little hidden references and stuff.
Cool.
Did you have a favourite side to ride?
Good question.
Horntail.
What's that?
Horntail.
That's
Ice.
Ice, sorry. Yeah,
to be honest, I've asked the question, I'm thinking, which was, I can't remember. Because I still work on it as Fire and Ice, and I can't remember. I think it was Ice, because it was a blue one, wasn't it? Yeah, I think Ice was my favourite.
You know, to everyone it was different. To the average person who would come through, like especially when I worked there, people pre-Potter that came to Universal maybe once or twice, who then were finally coming back for the first time. This used to be the Dolan ride, right? This was the Dolan one. Yeah. Well, it's not Dolan. How could it be the same ride? Like, the dragons, why would dragons face off against each other? They're here to face champions, and whatever answer you had to get. But
we were just having a bad day.
We'd get that all the time, and then other people just they knew Dueling Dragons, loved Dueling Dragons. They would literally constantly just refer to it as Fire and Ice, and that's the only way they wanted to. They refused to say Horntail and Fireball. That happened quite a bit, but it's just my favorite side, though. Like I said, was Horntail, the ice side, mostly because of what happened on Fireball with me.
Fair enough.
Granted, that was the first time I ever rode dragons. It was the fire side, but after that it was like I'm more for Horntail. That's just more my speed. But it's they were both good. Like on the final day, I rode both sides. I gave them both their fair time. But it's definitely some of the fans that would come through were very interesting. Like one of our most famous ones was, her name, we called her Raptor Joe, because she had a tattoo for the Raptor logo from Cedar Point on her, as well as other Dueling Dragons tattoos. Like Dragons was her favorite ride, and she worked at Raptor up in Cedar Point and would just come down, and she would come first thing in the morning, and she would just continually go on each side. Like she was above the rules for us. She was able to go, no one cared. She went through child swap. She would go and sit down in the back in seat 8 or row 8 every single time. She would put down all the harnesses and buckle them for us, so that way we had less to do. And I think her final ride count for each side was she rolled over 2,500 times.
Wow.
Each side. Yeah, and she was amazing. Like everyone lit up. She brought us bags of Starburst every single time she showed up, and that was like our little treat. And you always knew that she was there that day if you'd walk in the break room and you'd see that bag.
Awesome.
That is an impressive tally.
That is.
Yeah, no, because I even working there, I maybe did each side like I'd say probably like 100, 150 times. Because on days I worked as a lead shift, I'd have to ride each side, and sometimes multiple times during the day. So I never really rode it as a guest after I left working there.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things. I had my fair share of rides when I worked there.
Awesome. Well, it will always be Fire and Ice to me. So, Craig, it's been an absolute blast talking to you. It's actually been really interesting to go behind the scenes of it. Actually, I know you were saying like the budget thing was really boring, but it's just one of those things that your average theme park guest doesn't know that goes on behind the scenes. And it.
Oh yeah, I just there's lots more. I'm sure I forgot, and half the time when I'm telling some of these stories, it's making me think of stuff from Forbidden Journey as well that was weird and behind the scenes. So
That's all right. I'm sure we'll find space for you at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
yeah, no, I would love to do that. I'm sure then I'll remember stuff from Dragon Challenge that I forgot, and then it just works out behind the scenes with Craig.
That's a brilliant
That's cool,
idea.
actually. Don't be stealing that for your own podcast, by the way.
Hey, I don't like talking about it too much on my podcast. It's one of those things. It would get repetitive. That's all I would talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
true.
Cool. Well, I hope that's been a fitting tribute to Dragon Challenge, as it is defunct, but I think we're all excited to at least find out what the next step is going to be. We've got little hints, and we've discussed it quite a bit, but
Maybe it's just a big bank of lockers to sort that problem out.
as long as it's not screen-based, I think most people will be relatively happy.
I don't know. I'm liking the idea of a ride where you just go through a whole set of lockers that have screens on them.
Yeah, it could be here's a key, find your locker.
Oh, it'll be the
flying
from
keys.
the Philosopher's Stone, where they
Yep.
have to get on a broom and get the key for the lock.
There you go.
Oh, maybe that's what it is.
Sorted.
Maybe we've hit on it, and that's what it's going to be.
Let's go to Universal Creative right now.
Yep, I should have a job.
Cool. Thanks, Craig. I really appreciate you coming to talk on. And of course, you can listen to Craig. Craig, you are a huge part of the Diz. Obviously the Diz Unplugged Universal Edition is sort of your spiritual home, but
Yeah.
plug everything else.
YouTube.com/Disunplugged. That's where you'll find all of our podcasts, and you'll see my face many times a day if you've enjoyed listening to me this time around, which I don't know so much, but I'm constantly doing stuff all around Orlando all the time. So if you just like Orlando as a whole, maybe you'll like me.
But yes, again, definitely go and check out
Yeah.
the Diz Unplugged Universal.
No, and thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you. So we'll have to have some of y'all on ours at
Cool.
some point in time here.
Be awesome.
No, again, it's been really interesting. Like I say,
I
I know a
love
lot
these
of our
things.
listeners get in touch and want sort of team members on, because that fascination with knowing what goes on behind the scenes is something, as I've said, the average guest, you don't see it, and that's a good thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. But we are nosy
No,
buggers
it-
at heart.
Yeah.
No, I love telling people about it. So
Cool.
we'll do Forbidden Journey stories sometime. That's
Awesome.
a trip.
Cool.
Definitely.
Right, so that will wrap up episode 266. I am Lee, and so for Darren, Tracy, and Craig, we will see you next week.
Well, that wraps up another Unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Thanks for listening. Between shows, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes. It really helps. But if you're not an Apple user, you can find us on Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, or wherever great podcasts are found. Head over to our blog at uupodcast.com for show notes, articles, and more. You can get in touch with us by emailing podcast@uupodcast.com or leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/uupodcast. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. Just search UUO Podcast. And if you're planning a trip to Universal Orlando or Walt Disney World, please check out our sponsors by going to mouseandmuggle.com to book your next trip. Well, that's a wrap. See you next week.